All right, we're back. It's COMP391 and it's week 10, lesson 10, part 1. And what we're doing today is, to start off, is we're going to create a skybox, right? So how do we do that? Well, the first thing is, if you notice, you have a cube here, right? So this is cool. I want to use, there's two types of skyboxes. Let's start like this. There's two types of skyboxes that we're talking about it. So imagine, first of all, what is a skybox? I think that's the first question. Well, if you want the sky to look like a sky when you're inside a 3D game, right? So when your character actually does a look up, it looks up at the sky, as an example. There has to be some kind of boundary or whatever. Now, there's two ways of doing this. You can do it on the world, right? Or you can do it with some kind of shape, right? The first one to do it is with a square shape, like almost like a cube type shape. Now you might say, well, cube doesn't make any sense because the sky isn't square. But there are advantages from doing a cube. We'll talk about the kind of advantage and disadvantage. So the first thing you want to do is take your cube and you want to scale it up so that it's probably the size of the grid. Okay, so there's the size of the grid. I'm just going to scroll out here. So it's size of the grid, right? And the next thing is, we know that we need to add a material because we're going to add a texture, right? So usually I like adding materials and textures one by one. So this is the material. I'm going to rename this thing. I'm going to call it sky. Right, my sky material. And what I want to make it immediately, right? First of all, it can't be specular, right? Although the speculator would disappear in a second when I take off what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it shadeless. So right away, there's no shading. Now you want to make it shadeless because if you don't make it shadeless, it needs light, right? So you don't want to make it light up. That's number one. Second thing, right, is from a Blender render perspective, we want to move to Blender game. We want to change our lighting so that, again, we're using GLSL lighting. Okay, so all the regular tricks that we normally do, right? Okay, so there we go. So there's our cube. Now we need to find some kind of texture to wrap this around, and there needs to be a couple of ways. We need to kind of mark some seams on the box. So you ever see an exploded or kind of opened up box? It looks like a cross, right? Let me show you what I'm talking about here. So if I go to, kind of opened box, right? Or what I'm going to call flattened box. And we'll say cross. So what I mean by that is this. This is normally a box, as an example. When you unfold it, there are 6 sides to it, right, to make the box, right? And you need to make this kind of cross shape. This cross shape is what we want to kind of create, right? So in order for us to make a skybox, and don't worry about the crosses here, but what I want to do is unfold the box so that the sides look like this, right? So side, 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 and then bottom and top, right? That's the kind of idea. So the seams then would be, there would be a seam on one side of the box, a seam on the other side of the box, a seam on the third side and the fourth side, right? But you wouldn't have a seam here. There would be one side, whether it's the top or the bottom, that there wouldn't be a seam, right? It doesn't matter where it would be. Like, there have to be some kind of solid sides, right? And you'd have one of the sides of the bottom, right? One of the sides of the bottom have a seam because it's going to seam up with everything else. Okay, so there'll be a seam on this side, seam on this side, seam on this side, but not a seam on the top. Okay, so that's the way we think about it. So the top or the bottom wouldn't have a seam, right? Or one of the tops, top or the bottom, wouldn't have a seam. And then for one of the other sides, either the top or the bottom, your choice, I'll show you what I'm talking about, has to have 3 sides that are seamed but not one. Okay, so when we unravel the box, we open up the box, it looks like like this shape here. How do we do that? First of all, to know that we're being successful, we have to change our view. And what I want to do is I want to go from a default view into a UV editing view. Right, so here's our UV editing view. I'm just going to kind of scroll out here. There's our box. I want to go into edit mode for the box itself, right? And if you notice on the left-hand side, right, when I'm in edit mode, I want to do an unwrap, right? And if you notice on the left here, when I do an unwrap, the basic unwrap looks as this square, right? So when I do an unwrap here, this isn't what I want, right? There's different ways of unwrapping. If I press U for unwrapping, so I'm here in edit mode, and I press U for unwrap, I can do a bunch of different kinds of unwrapping, right? One of them is a smart UV project unwrap. If I press just keep the defaults and press OK, I get this. Take a look. There's all these different sides, right? Now, if I want to show you which side is which, I'm just going to deselect all. And if I select the top, so I'm going to go Control Tab, and I'm going to select faces. Select the top face. Look where that is. That's the top face, right? And if I shift select another face, that's the bottom face, or that's the side face, or whatever, right? And I can shift select different faces so you understand which faces are being selected, right? Now if you notice, take a look what's happening here, right? I've got this one way over here, kind of weird. The reason why it's doing this is it's trying to put this into this texture. Now we don't have a texture. We've unwrapped an empty texture right now. So I need to mark the seams. Remember what I said to you? We're not going to mark the bottom seams. We're not going to do that. That's where it's going to unwrap. But we're going to mark this seam, the back seam, and this seam. And we're going to mark 3 edges of the top, but not the back, so it can unwrap. You getting me? Okay. Let's deselect all. One of the things to do when you're marking seams, and I want to mark seams, the only way to do that is if I go to Edges, I want to go to Mark Seams, right? So if I want to mark a seam, I'm going to right-click on the edge that I want to mark. Now I can't do this in face mode. I got to do it in edge mode. So I'm going to go Control-Tab to go back into edge mode. I'm going to select the edge. This is one of the edges. These 4 edges I'm going to select, right? Bear with me. We'll do this step by step. Remember, the top is the one that's going to be partly marked. The bottom we're not going to mark at all, right, because that's going to stay solid, right? And the edges, all these edges we're going to mark because those are the places where the box is going to split open. Imagine if you're opening up a box and I take a knife and I go whoosh, edge. I take a knife, cut all the box like this. These three edges, right? So you can do that, right? But if I mark this back one, and this one, and this one, and this one, I'm going to cut this piece off. I don't want to cut that piece off. I want that piece to be part of the box with one edge still kind of part of it, right? A good way to do this before I start marking seams is to go into orthographic mode to make sure that we got the right seams to mark. So if I want to look at it from the front, right, at the front of the box, right, I can mark things off from the front first. Let's do that. So I go View. Actually, let me pull out my little keyboard, because you guys have the pleasure of having a keyboard that I do not have, right? I always find this very useful, this little keyboard. All right, so if I want to go to front mode, again, I'm going to activate my keyboard. I'm going to go to front mode. This is my front mode. So if I notice, if this is my front, if you say I'm in perspective mode, here is front ortho mode, and I want to go into Z, right? If you notice, if I go into Z mode, into wireframe mode, I can see that I've got my first seam marked. Okay, let's go back into solid mode for a second and go into front mode. I want to go into front mode and solid because if I go into wireframe mode, I'd be able to see through it. So marking this first seam is important. So again, I'm going to go Control-Tab to make sure I'm in edge mode, and I'm going to mark off my first seam. Okay, so this is the first seam that I've marked.
Why go to this option seam?
Here, mesh. I haven't done it yet. Edges, which is Control-E, right? And then mark seam. So if you want to do it by Control-E, so you can go Control-E, right? And then I can go mark seam. Okay, that's the first seam I marked. And if you notice, it's the front seam, right? I want to do the same thing with the right side of my front, the front part of my box. So the front side of my box is going to come down to me, right? See what I'm saying? So I'm going to mark this seam. So I've marked this edge. I'm going to select the edge in edge select mode. I don't want to mark the back edge. I want to mark the front edge. So I've got this is my front. Right, I'm just trying to constrain it so you can see it. And I'm marking this edge now. So I'm going to go Control-E, and then I'm going to go mark seam. Okay, so I've got those 2 seams done. Okay, let's control. I'm going to go to Control-1, which will take me to the back. There's my back ortho mode. And if you notice, my back seams aren't marked yet. So I'm going to first select my edge. I'm going to Control-E and mark seam. I'm just rotating it so I can see the back edges. And when I right-click on this one, this is the back edge, right? I'm going to Control-E and then mark seam.
Is there a reason to do that individually as opposed to all at once?
Yeah, so you understand what you're doing. You can do it. You can do it obviously all at once, but I want you to. I want to show you which ones you're marking. Okay, cool. So we've marked those seams, right? We're not going to mark seams that don't come apart. Those are the first 4. All right, cool. Now, what I want to do on the top. So this, I'm going to go to front mode, and I'm going to look at the top of my box, right? I want to mark 3 of the 4 seams, but not the back one. The back seam I'm going to keep. I'm not going to mark. But 1, 2, 3 seams, I'm going to mark these 3. 1, 2, 3. So I can select them all. So let's do it. So right shift right click. I'm marking those 3 seams, and I'm going to go Control E, and then mark seam. Okay, so I've got all my seams now, right? Now I don't have my seams here marked on the bottom at all because I want that to be solid. Okay, so let's select all now. Look what I got. I've got the same thing, and I want to unwrap, right? And I want to do an unwrap. If I just do a regular unwrap, I get this now. So unwrap, U for unwrap, and then I get this shape. You see the shape? Do you guys get this shape? Mm-hmm. If you guys don't get this shape, right, then you haven't done something right. Would you like me to show you again? John, you got it, or you don't got it? What we're doing, I want you to picture literally taking the faces off your object, right? Because what I'm trying to do with you guys is we're going to mark up the object. The first thing is to create seams, and what the seams do is when we unwrap, they physically unwrap around those edges, right? This can apply to anything you want to make, right? So let's say you want to unwrap two sides of a sphere, right? So I've got one part of the sphere on the left and the other part of the sphere on the right. I make a seam that goes all the way around. It can't be all the way around because if it goes all the way around, it's just going to do this, 2 different seams. If I want them to connect somewhere in the middle, there's going to be a part that I don't mark. The other piece I mark, right? Like 1/2 of the circle I mark, but not the other half. And then when it splits open, it's connected like this, right? It's almost like if I was going to cut something. These are cuts that I've made in my box. So my box is now unfolded. Now this isn't the right configuration, as you'll see, right? But for now, this is a good start. Okay, so our mark. If I did what? Well, then that just each individual texture would be separate. That's all it would mean, right? And you can move them around separately. Now right now they're all connected. They're connected from the ones because remember it's all one object. So each of the faces of the object are connected where I didn't mark a seam. Wherever I marked a seam, they've been disconnected, and now they form this shape. When I unwrap it, it's hard for you to understand. The best thing to do is get a box, make a box out of paper, right, and cut it up for yourself. Unwrap it into this shape. This is what it would make. So if you notice, this would come up. This face would come up like this, right? And this face would come up, and this face would come up, and this face would come up, and then you'd have the top of the box. So the bottom of the box, which is this one here, and I'll show you that. If I go to the bottom of the box, if I deselect all and go to the bottom of the box, so if I want to go to Control Tab to go into face select mode, and I select the bottom, that's the bottom of the box, right? Now if I start selecting other pieces, right, there's the sides, so I can show you how they go on, right? So I want to shift select all of them. See if I can do this without deselecting everything. Sorry, I'm getting a really weird effect. There it is. So I'm seeing through my selection. So this is just the bottom of the box and the 4 sides. So it'd make the bottom box, but the top would be empty. The top isn't selected so that it doesn't show. So this is, if you see 4 like this, then it's just the bottom of the box that's being selected, but the top is empty. So if I click the top, now you've got if I can actually click it without it deselecting the bottom, there it is. Then it gives me this piece here, the top of the box. Okay, so now that we've successfully sliced it up, and John, you got it going? Okay, so you should have this shape. We all have the shape? Because if we don't have the shape, we can't do what we're going to do. Now we're going to find a texture, right? And again, you can go online for this. If you say Skybox, if I look for a Skybox texture and go to Images, right? Now if you notice, there's the shapes. Take a look, right? Here's the shapes of the Skybox, right? Okay, now we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. What's the problem? The problem is my Skybox is turned on its side, right? Not really a problem, it's just the way it is. So let's pick one. Now there's different ways we can pick them. If I pick one of these ones, like for example this one, you're going to see clouds and the sun on the top. This is the top one, whatever. We have to rotate this because what we want to do is we want to rotate the box so that it matches up. My shape matches the texture. That's what I want to do, right? And the same thing goes here. There is no texture, if you notice, that goes up and down like the way we have it. So preparing for that, if I know that my texture is the way it's going to be right here, right? And I know that this is the way it's going to happen. I'm going to make my texture look like this. Well, there's one that's kind of weird, another way, right? But most of them are from the left to right is where the texture looks like, right? Also, sometimes you have a shape like this as well. I don't recommend using this type of T. I recommend using a cross like this when you make your skybox, okay? So preparing for this, before we download a texture, let's go back to Blender. So I know I need this to happen. I'm just going to get rid of my my tool here on the right. I'm going to pull my, what I'm going to do is I'm going to also press T for tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just separate the separation. I'm just going to pull this to the side so I can focus on this. And I'm going to scroll in so I get maximum size of my box. So what do I want to do? What am I talking about here? I want to rotate this whole thing, right? Now I'm not going to rotate it here. I'm rotating the mesh, my UV unwrap here on this side. So I'm going to go R for rotate, right? And if I want to, I can do it like by hand, right? Or I can go R for rotate, and if I press 90, it'll be the wrong way. Take a look, 90 is the wrong way. So I'm going to R for rotate minus 90, which is what I want, right? So this is the shape I want. Then I'm going to press G for grab, right? I'm going to put my texture approximately where it's going to be. By the way, guys, this isn't going to be correct. Why? Because this is a square, and my skybox is going to match this thing. So we're going to have to rotate. We're going to have to adjust this shape again. But this is the first change we have to make, so that our shape looks like this. Okay, good. So here's our skybox. Let's pick one. I'm just going to pick, and again, I've just put skybox in here, right? And I'm going to pick the first one on the left, which is 2048 by 1536. That's a really good size. If you notice, you want to pick a big texture. If you pick a small texture, you know what's going to happen. You're going to have pixelation, right? And then it's going to show really ugly, right? Okay, so let's grab this one, this first one. And I'm going to right-click on this one and save image as. I'm going to put this into my downloads folder. And we're going to just call this skybox.jpg. Skybox, right? There's my skybox. And now I'm going to point to it, right? So now there's different ways of doing this. I'm going to point to it right in here in my UV editor without going and creating a texture, right? Take a look. So I'm going to go in here, right? I'm going to go open, and I'm going to go to my downloads where I have my, just wait. I'm going to open it here, right? And then I'm going to go where my downloads where I have my skybox. I'm going to pick my skybox and press open image. Do what I just did. So I went open here, down here on the bottom. There's a controlled open, and I've got the image now. This is my image. You got it? Good. Now, if you notice, are we aligned? No, we're not aligned at all, right? How do I align my box properly? Well, we learned how to do all this stuff before, because when we did all basic modeling, it allows us to scale and do all this kind of stuff. So the first thing I want to try and do is I want to press the G button, right? And I want to use my arrow controls to kind of center it as much as I can. Right? What was that? Shift? Shift tab to do what? Okay, so if I do, let's try Shift tab. That just does one, right? But what I want to do is I want to kind of, I want to press G and kind of move down. Sorry. Oh, I see what you're doing. You're snapping too. So when I pick G, I want to press Shift tab again. So press G, I want to move it down so that it's centered as much as possible, right? Now if you want to really see this, oops, G, I'm going to press Enter, and if I want to see where this is, I want to make it larger, so I'm going to kind of zoom in here as much as I can to this, right? Now if you notice, there is some pixelation on the back. There is, even with that large texture that I picked. It's still quite pixelated, right? What I want to do now is I want to scale, but I only want to scale in the one direction. Like, what's this direction here, up and down? Would you say it's Y?
Z.
No, it's Y. So if I go scale on the Y-axis and I go up then what I'm going to do is it's going to scale to the point where it's pretty much as close as I'm going to get to the edges. If I keep scaling, I'm going to have some issues. I'm going to fix these in a second, all right? But I want to try and do this as much with a constraint as possible. Okay, there's a problem. Here are the problems, all right? Here's the problem. The problem is that I'm not perfectly scaled. So if I go zoom in, right, we don't want this thing to happen to us. I don't want this little edge here to be here. I don't want this little edge here to be here. And I can't scale much better than what I've got, right? So I'm going to deselect all on this side. Okay, I'm going to go to my left. Now it's quite pixelated, this image, but you know it is what it is. We got a bad image. We're going to do it again. This is not the first time. This is not the only time we're going to do it. So I'm going to press. Let's do that again. I'm going to press right click. First I want to go into edge mode. So I'm going to Control Tab. I want to go into edge mode. All the same modeling techniques we can use on a 3D surface, we can use on this 2D surface. So I'm going to press right click. I'm going to right click my edges, right? So I'm going to right click this edge because I want to match them all up, right? So right click all these edges. So this is the first edge, right? And now what I want to do, right, is I want to grab this edge and move it down, right? So I'm going to grab this edge, but I only want to move it down on the y-axis. So y-axis, so grab G plus the y, and then move it down so that it kind of matches as much as possible with this line. So we're trying to eliminate, look at that, that's not really good. It's actually not a great skybox. So let's try that again. So grab along the y-axis and make it so that it meets pixel by pixel as much as possible that line. If you really want help, zoom in even more. Zoom in until you see this. Take a look. You can zoom in quite nicely, right? So I'm going to grab again this edge, limit it on the y-axis, and pull it down so that there's as little of an edge, or it's as close as you're going to get. Zoom in as much as you can. Keep zooming. Look, this is my maximum zoom here. Take a look, guys. Maximum zoom. Grab G, use the y-axis, and pull it down so that it matches as much as possible this line. And this is as good as you're going to get. So if I zoom back out again, you notice that that top edge is aligned. Okay. Okay. Now I want to do the same thing for the other edges. While I do this, I want you to do the same. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I want you to do it. So for the next thing, I got to deselect all. So deselect all, right? And I'm going to just grab these edges now. So this is the next edge I'm going to align. And we're going to do all the edges one by one. And the reason for this is because if we don't, we're going to have an edge, a seam that appears in the sky, right? We don't want that to happen, right? Okay, so I'm going to zoom in right in here and just pull it up. Now if you notice there's a bit of an edge, take a look. There's a bit of an edge here, right? And the question that I would have to you, and this is, I'm going to zoom right up here. So you can see I'm zoomed, maximum zoom in a second. I want to pull this edge along the y-axis. I'm going to press G along the y-axis. I'm going to pull it down so that it meets this bottom edge as much as possible. And I'm going to keep zooming in. So I'm maximum zoom here. So I'm going to G along the y-axis and maximum zoom. All right, so now when I go back up, that edge and this edge are both aligned. Would you agree? As much as possible anyway. So now I'm going to do the same thing, move to the other edges. So I'm going to take these two major edges. Here, look. This one, and then I'll do this one. I'm going to align those ones. So I'm going to deselect all. I'll select this one, and this one, and this one, and then zoom in until you see that if it's not good, we can always correct, because we can always go back and see the effect of the skybox, right? And I'm going to kind of go in there. And you know what? You see this? There's a gradation here. Take a look, guys. See this gradient? There's between this edge and this edge. You know what? I probably want to align to this brighter edge. If I go here to this dark edge, I'm going to see a seam in the sky, right? So what I want to just zoom as much as I can into this area until I get to maximum zoom, and so I have to correct the other ones in a second. Here I am. Okay, I'm going to press G, and this time I'm going to limit it on the x-axis, so it only goes x and right and left, and then I'm going to kind of go right into there so that my edges match up. So my edge matches up to that one, right? And you know, while we're at it, since we're up here, look, we're up here. Might as well match up this edge up here. So I'm just going to just right click on that one and zoom in, shift, and then kind of move up, and then kind of make sure I move up to maximum zoom without losing my position. Right, so I'm kind of moving up to maximum zoom here. Maximum zoom, I'm going to press the G button on this top edge, limit it on the y-axis, and move it up to the top. Just so it matches as much as possible this one. Now, is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. This is a very low pixel image. Let's go back to this other side here. So I've got one side done of this part. I want to get the other side done. So I'm going to kind of scroll out so I can see the sides. And now I'm going to go right click, shift right click, right? And then scroll in, maximum zoom. I see that there's a bit of an edge here. This is really good control. Blender gives you the ability to really control things. So I'm going to hit G, limit it on the x-axis with X, and move it kind of right into that edge here. Right. Scroll back out. All I'm doing is I'm sizing my box so that it matches the texture as best as possible. And this is, you're going to say, well, hold on, Tom, you guys are, this is all manually done. Yes, it is. Because there are some tools that allow you to do things automatic, but none of them give you the right control. Just going to maximum zoom here. Now, this is really off, so I'm going to go G along the x-axis. Oh, sorry. Escape. G along the y-axis, pull this down. And then shift up. And then zoom in even more. Maximum zoom. This is really off, this bottom edge here. So G along the y-axis, pull this down, and zoom in. Maximum zoom. Okay, good. So G along the y-axis, and then pull this down so it's all the way, kind of meets that bottom edge as much as possible. We're trying to get rid of the seam, right? And I'm going to scroll the way out again. All right, so we got the top seam, we got the bottom seam. We got to fix these two sides again because maybe I made a boo-boo on these ones. So let's try this again. So I'm going to kind of do this one, this one, this one, and this one because there's a black edge over here that I'm going to see. I don't want to see that black edge. I'm going to kind of scroll in here and scroll in here and scroll in here. I'm going to pull this one down to here. So it's the bright edge, not the dull edge that I'm going to grab. And it's quite off, right? So again, I'm going to grab this top edge. I'm going to go G along the y-axis and pull this down, and then pull it up. Scroll in, maximum zoom, G along the y-axis, and I'm going to move this so it's pretty much on the bright side. And scroll out again. That's a little better. Okay, a couple more. Align this edge again. You may have to do this a couple times, as you see I'm doing, only because you want to get as close as possible to this bottom edge. That's the bright side of the edge, not the dark side. All right, so this is I actually did this pretty good, this one. See? Yeah, this one's pretty good. It's not perfect. Okay, same thing with this extreme left edge and the extreme right edge, and then I'm done. So here's my extreme left edge. I'm going to grab this one and then zoom in, making sure that this is good. See, I've got a bit of separation here. On my maximum zoom, I got just a minor thing to do. Here's when I say G along the x-axis, and I'll move this line so it's just within that area. Talk about graphic arts, eh? And then go right across the other side to finish off. Grab this edge, move in, zoom in. Oh, a little bit off. Take a look. My maximum zoom, and what am I going to do? I'm going to press G along the x-axis, and then move that edge as close as I can to the right. All right, now, even though I've done all this careful work, and so have you, right? We've got all this texture the way it looks. We don't know what the effects of our texture is going to be. I'm not going to touch anymore. I'm going to kind of select all again, right? And kind of, I want to move it to the side and maybe zoom out a little bit so we can bring back this side. So I've got my thing lined up as best as possible. Maybe you did too. And I'm going to bring this one back, make this one the center point of everything. And now if you notice, I'm still in edit mode, but I'm not in a mode that I can see my texture. So first of all, I'm going to go into user ortho mode, or user prep or perspective mode. There it is. I'm in perspective mode, and I want to get positioned so that my x coordinate points to the right, and my y coordinate points forward, and my z coordinate points up. Right? And I want to change my shader from this solid shader to material. Okay. So that's the one thing I want to show you, right? So this is where I'm at. And it looks white to me, right? How come? How come? Well, without touching anything else, well, I want you to go change views again. So I want to go from UV editing mode, right? And by the way, I want to go to tab into solid tab again into this object mode again. Now, if you notice, it's just white. Why is it white? Because we haven't applied the texture yet. We've coordinated the texture. We've created the UV map. We haven't applied it yet because we don't have a texture, right? We've done it without a texture yet because we're going to go back into default mode, right? And if you notice, if I scroll up here, I've got my sky. Here's my box. I'm going to go back into material so I can see that it's completely white and glowing. That's what you should see right now.
If you open texture, will you see?
Wait. If I go here to texture, right? And if you notice, I've got a texture. It says generated flat. I've got my texture here, right? But what I want is I don't want generated flat, right? That's not what I want. I want it to be a UV map, right? That's what I want for my UV map. So if I go, I want to be able to change my texture, right? Now this is my texture for my, this is material. It shows me right here. If I go here to texture, right? As an example, there's a brush. See what it is? Brush. I don't want that one. I want this one. Still want this one up here, right? So there's different types of texture data that we have here, right? And there's a sky. It's on our texture. We do have a texture, but we don't have anything that I'm using right now, right? Okay. So I don't want generated flat. That's the mapping, and I don't want to use this texture, right? See where the type is none? I want you to choose image or movie. Okay, cool. I already have the image or movie, so I'm not going to select new. I'm not going to open it up. I already have it. I'm going to go here to this little icon here, and I'm going to select my skybox. Okay, got some weird stuff going on here. Don't worry about this. This is generated flat. That's not what we want, right? I want to go where it says UV, and I want to use my UV map, right? And now I've got my texture. Take a look. Right? Now, why does it look this way? Even though we unwrapped the box the way we did, very carefully and so on, right? The top of my texture is actually here. This is the top of my box. This is my sun. See the sun? Here's my clouds and here's my ground. So what do I need to do? Rotate. I'm going to rotate this whole thing on the y-axis by 90 degrees approximately, or negative 90. So I'm going to press R along the y-axis, right? There's the y-axis, negative 90. So it looks like this. This box still looks like, so that the sun is up and the ground is down. Do you guys see that?
No, I'm not getting the image.
The way I did it was, I went into, we'll do it again. This is the first time we'll do it. We'll do it one more time. If you notice, what I did was I said, the type of image was, the type of material was an image or movie, right? And after that, I picked my image or movie instead of down here under image. I picked it by selecting Skybox, the one we just downloaded, right? That's the one. And then as I move down, right, you've got to change from your coordinate mapping from whatever it was generated to UV, and then I'm choosing UV map. I'm also got my shader down here. I've got my shader to material on the game side. So this shader right here has got to be material shading.
All that is right.
All right. Now I see some issues. Do you see the issue that I see? Look at this up top here. See this little line? Right? So how do I see the skybox? Right now I'm outside of the skybox. I want to see inside of the skybox. Well, what it would look like inside is this. Take a look now. So I'm inside the skybox. And I see my seams, right? So what am I looking at? What seam is this? Take a look. My seam, it's a really crappy skybox, by the way. My seam is this one, right? Which is the top of the lid, if you will. These three seams. So my top, wherever my top is I've got seams. On the bottom, I'm pretty good. I've got one seam way down here. Take a look. You can't see it because of my grid, but if I look down there, I see another seam down here, right, and another seam over there. So these seams over here, I can still see them, which means I got to come in a little bit more than I've come in already, right? But this is what my skybox kind of looks like. If I look around, I can see with a crappy view. It's really a crappy skybox that I downloaded. But this is good. We're going to do this one more time. Huh? What was that? Oh, that's bad. Let's go back to that skybox and download the real one. I replace my image with my. Okay, so I'm going to go in here. And I'm going to right-click and save image as, and we'll just call it Skybox. Instead of Skybox texture, we'll go to download and replace the image that I have with Skybox and load it in again. Actually, you know what? I'll call it Skybox texture so it won't collide. Save. And now let's change the image. So instead of my Skybox that I used before, this JPEG, we'll use this Skybox texture that I just changed. I got a higher res image. Okay, let's check that out. So I'm going to go back to Blender. How do I change images? Well, I can load it up. I can go back to where my Skybox is showing. Here's my image or movie. And I can go to this little file folder, open image, right? And I can actually open my Skybox texture. Let's check this out, an open image. That's much better, huh? Take a look. And now there's less of a seam. It's much, much nicer. Look.
How did you get the texture instead of the...
I went into the, as was suggested, I went into the object, so I went here, and I drilled down. So here, if I go back, if I go into here, Skybox, and I went to here, and if I grab it from here, that's what I did, I get the thumbnail. But if I click onto it, then if I right-click here, I get the 2048 by 1536, right?
And you get it as a texture instead of...
It just says Skybox texture. That's just what it's called, right? But you can rename it to whatever you like. If I right-click and save image as, look, right-click, save image as, Matt, it'll give you an option to rename it. It's just Skybox texture.
I did that to begin with.
Yeah, that's fine. So you can rename it to whatever you want. So anyways, and then I just loaded it up again. I went to here, under image. Instead of selecting, I have two images. I have skybox.jpg, and I have skybox texture. Look, there's two options here. One of them is the low resolution one, the skybox.jpg. The other one is the high resolution one, the skybox texture. And the skybox texture I just loaded up by pressing this button, this open image button. All right, so I've got my first skybox, and it looks pretty good. Again, I got my sky. If I want to make realistic lighting, what do I do?
Where the sun is.
Yeah. So this is what I do. I kind of position the sun, and in order for me to do that, I'm going to kind of pull out a little bit. And this is what my user ortho looks like, right? I have my top view. I'm going to go to top view for a second. There's my sun on my top view. Take a look, right? So I'm just looking at it from the top of the box now, right? And I want to create a new light source, right? So I'm going to go kind of Shift A, or actually let's just Shift S to make sure that my cursor is to the center. That's the first thing. So my cursor is right in the center. Then I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to add in a lamp, which is a sun. Okay, now my sun, unfortunately, is in the middle of my object right now, right? So I'm going to kind of pull it out. So I'm going to kind of go way out here. There's my sun. Because my sun is way out there. I'm going to go again to top view, right? And I'm going to pull my sun out in top ortho mode. I'm going to pull my sun out so that it's matching up with my object. And it's got to be inside my object, or else I won't be able to see it. Let's go to front view and see what that looks like. It's way out here. It's like way outside my box. No one's going to see it, right? So I'm going to kind of put it at just underneath inside my box. If we go to the right side, you see it's correctly positioned now. It's inside my box. I want to kind of make it to the top, as much closer to the top, so it just barely peeks out as possible. If I go into the box now, so if I click on the box and kind of scroll in, and scroll back out again. Oops. Whoa. And scroll in till I'm in. What was that? Well, the reason why I'm getting this is I'm in ortho mode. I want to be in perspective mode, right? So here I am, and take a look. I've got this sun. I'm inside my object here, right? So I've got this sun that's inside of my box now, right? And when I've selected it, if I go to the top and if I click this lamp object icon, I notice that my energy is fairly low, right? I can increase my energy. First, let's kill this one. This lamp shouldn't be. It should just be a sun lamp, right? So I kill this lamp. The default lamp is gone. And I have my new lamp, which is this one, right? This lamp here, it's a 1 energy. I can make this as bright as I want. Let's make it a 5, just to show you the difference here. Okay, cool. This is really bright sun. Okay, now, I'm still looking at the ground. I'm in the sky. Like literally I'm hanging in the sky here, guys, right? But let's say I'm on a battlefield and the sky is all the way around me, right? Well, I want to Shift S as an example and cursor to center. Let's zoom out again. Right, so I can see that my cursor's to center. Here it is. And what I want to do with this one, right, is I want to create a ground, right, a plane. So let's go Shift A, and I'll make a plane, mesh plane, right, and I will scale my plane up so that it takes up most of my box here. Right, my plane, why is it looking like this? It's looking like this for a couple of reasons. One, my sun is super bright. Like I made my sun like crazy bright. There it is. Whoa. My sun is super bright. And the other thing is I don't have any kind of material on my plane. So let's go add another material. And just to make it different, I'll make my plane, my diffuse, my plane, I'll make it so that it's kind of a dark or darker brown-ish color. But look, it's not looking bright. It's not looking brown, it's looking yellow because of the power of my sun, where it's positioned in my screen, right? And I want to show my specularity. This is good. So let's tune down this energy. Let's go to energy 1 like it used to be. This is what my brown would look like, energy 1, right? And if you notice, my ground material is fairly specular, right? So if I click on this, I should see, from a specularity perspective, some shading, right? Because look, this is not shadeless. My background is shadeless, but this is not shadeless, right? Okay, good. So now let's add, and this is where look at my sun. Look where it's pointing. Look where my glow is happening. By the way, if you notice, I didn't quite make my plane the same size as my thing. So I'm just gonna size it up a little bit more, so it's just outside of my sphere, of my thing. So it looks like this on the outside. Take a look. It's just outside. All right, so I'm in my sun. I've got my sun way up there, and if you notice, it's pointing straight down, right over there, right? If I want to add another object, so let's add Shift A for add another object. Let's add a cube, right? And we'll bring this cube up. And if you notice now, I've got some shading on the top, right? But I've got no other shading on around because I need to add a material. So I'm going to say new material for my cube. And let's make the material greenish. There's my material. And now, here's the problem that I have, right? I'm getting great color on the top, right? Because that's where my sun is positioned, right? But I'm getting crappy color everywhere else. Why? The sun, you'd be forgiven to think that a sun is a great idea, right? But the problem with the sun is its ambient light, right? So if I go to here, remember, video games are all about tricks. I'm just going to go back into the cube. Sorry, my skybox. So I want to point up to this thing, and if you notice up here, right, if I change my lighting, now I only have any other lighting except for the skybox and the sun, right? So if I go to 0.25, let's just really reduce it. What really happens, right? I get the top of my box, and this is really poorly lit because it produces ambient lighting in that corner, right? So how do I change this? Let's say I made my sun instead of a sun. First of all, by the way, it's my cube, my skybox is stupidly small. Like it's really small for my cube. Like my skybox should be way bigger than this, right? But let's start off with this size. And then we're going to have other issues with my skybox. What other issues could I have if I make it really massive?
Like,
huh? I won't see it because of the mist effect. Mist is on, so my camera can only see so far. We have to adjust the camera so we can see my horizon if it's really actually a big horizon, right? These are some of the issues. All right, so let's change this lamp from a sun, which if you notice it's selected as sun. Let's make it a spot and see what the difference is. Okay, so there's a spot that's really dim, right? So there's kind of sun breaking through the clouds kind of thing, right? And let's make this so that my energy level goes back up to 1. Okay, so that's still quite low, right? So spot only kind of illuminates a spot from the sky where I've got it to. So there's where my sky is, and it's illuminating this one spot. That's not great. Now I could re-angle it so it kind of goes across my whole scene, right? So let's say example is there's where my sun is, right? And where it is in the sky, I could re-angle it. I could use a combination of light sources so that I could have an ambient light that's in the same spot. So I can kind of, kind of select something about up here, like put my cursor up here, right? And I could say Shift A, and I could add another light source right on top of the other one, right? Lamp, and I want to make a point lamp up there, right? Here's my point lamp with a bit of a light source over here. So if the sun, as if the sun is shining, and then I could re-aim the sun, because if you notice, an angle, it looks like should be coming from here down kind of this way, because if you see that the clouds are illuminated as well from inside the skybox. Now this is all nice. Try and make a realistic lighting here happen on my cube. But the way to do it, of course, would be to rotate this so that the sun shines down. Let's get rid of the first one, my first lamp, which is the sun. Let's get rid of it. So I'm going to press X. Just watch. And now I have illumination coming from there with a spot, as opposed to a sun. Sun, even though it's labeled sun, gives you top illumination from wherever it's coming from. And it gives you ambient light. So it doesn't give you shadows like the way we get right now. Look at the shadows that I'm getting now from my spot. And now it's not very bright. I can make this spot brighter. So I can go back down to lamp. Here's my point lamp, I mean. I can make my point lighter by going 5. That's quite much brighter. But I do get the same kind of good shadowing that I'm getting on from this kind of thing. I get some pretty good stuff here.
I'm getting a fair bit of shadowing from the sun now.
Really depends on your options. Right now, remember, I'm in GLSL mode and Blender Game. You might be in a different mode. Right, that's the difference.
Blender Game actually doesn't seem to change it. I have a backlight going.
That's the other thing. You might have something else going. You can actually add different kind of positioning. So this is looking pretty good, but it's really small, right? So how do I make it so that my cube, I can do this, I can make these really small. This one option is to reduce my size of my object. So I'm going to say scale down. So my cube now, oops, let's undo that. Scale down so my cube is much smaller. So it looks like, from that perspective, if I zoom into it, here, let's make my cube really, really small, right? I could do this. Here's my ground. And I can take the perspective of my cube, and I'm just going to zoom in here. Zoom in user perspective mode, right? So it looks like my sky is much farther away. And if I put my camera behind my cube when I'm moving, then it looks like, as an example, if let's say this is my camera, and I only see the top of my cube as if it's like the top of my car. Think of this as the trunk of my car kind of thing, right? I want to kind of align my camera to view. How do I do that? I go view, right? And by the way, I'm doing a random view. Align view, align active camera to view, right? Here's my active camera to view, right? I'm press N from my button, and then what I want to do here is I want to lock my camera to my view, right? And I'm going to scroll back out so I can see the top of my box here, so I can see this part is happening. And I'm going to unlock this again for 1 second. Get rid of the N, so get rid of this side. So I see where my active camera is. Look at where my camera is now. Take a look. Put it right on my my box. It's pretty big, right? And this is where my camera is. So my box is actually sticking inside of my camera. If I want to see the front of my trunk, or what do you want to call it? This is the top of my character, if you will, right? Well, still, even if I move my character from my character controls, I need to kind of parent my camera to my object. So the way to do that, of course, would be right-click on my camera, right-click on my object, and press, in object mode, press, not play, Control P, parent to object. Right, there it is. Okay, so now what I have is, if you notice, I have a cube object, which I will rename as player. My camera is actually inside of there. Let's take a look. If I open it up, I have a cube and a camera. Here's my player cube. We'll call this player cube. And here's my camera. My player cube, my camera, right? And now if I add in controls to my player. So here's my player. I want to add in some logic bricks so I can move them around. So I'm going to go down here, change this from this view to logic editor, and now we'll add in some basic logic controls like we did before. Let's just add in some right and left movement, just so we can keep it simple because we don't have a lot of time today. And you can intuit the rest, right? So let's just go in here, make these logic bricks here on the bottom. I've just changed to logic editor. I move this into a keyboard sensor, and we're going to make it so that it goes left and right. So here's my A key, add another sensor, and that's left first, and another keyboard sensor, and I'm going to add in a D key. Here we go, so A and D. And then I add a couple of actuators. So I want to do a motion actuator for my object. We'll make it so that it moves across the, oh, and I automatically see a problem. What's the problem? Look at my orientation. My Y, I've oriented it incorrectly. My Y is over here and my X is over here. So without making too many changes, I'm just going to make it go across my Y-axis. So I'm going to go left key goes across my Y-axis on a negative. Actually, it's a positive. So I'm rotated 20. And then so I'll kind of attach those together.
Is there a way to differentiate which way the player is
Positioned.
facing?
Yeah, because see this? My X and Y coordinates.
Yeah.
You can, right now I'm looking to the right. My camera is looking this way to the right because across the X-axis, right? I should have done it so it's across the Y-axis because that's typical, but it doesn't have to be. All right, so I got my, add another actuator.
Like a way for the player to rotate. I would want the WASD to move in the direction the player, like relative to the direction the player is facing. Is that something I can do with Blender?
Yes. You want to create a mouse look with your mouse? I mean, look around with your mouse.
Yeah, if I wanted to rotate and like be able to move.
Well, here I'll show you. So let's say, first of all, let's add some motion. So again, this is going to go up, and then this will go down 2 Blender units. And if I press play, oops. And if I press in object mode, if I press play, what happens to my skybox? Should be gone, right? So look, I can move here and there. The other thing is that my player cube, that's the other option. My player cube is, from a physics perspective, is static, right? I want to make it so that it is a character, right? And I want to make it an actor. If I press play now, my skybox disappears, and I can move and try it again. So play. Yeah, so it goes both ways. It goes in the same direction. Let's make sure I didn't do this. Make a boo boo. Y positive. I did. Yeah, so I want to make Y go negative for my D key. Press P. So there's my key. But how come my camera isn't moving? Well, because I'm not in camera mode. I have to go into camera mode first, then press P. And then if you notice, if I move right or left, my camera is moving to the left or right of my cube. But how come I can't see my cube? How come I can't see what's going on here? Because my normals have to be flipped, right? So I got to go up to here, right-click on my cube. So go back out of this mode and select my cube, my skybox, if you will. And the way I can do that is just get out of here, select my cube.
When you play, can you see the mouse?
Well, you can, but you can't see, I mean, unless you make it transparent. So I go object, right? And you want to go to normals and flip normals, right? Because if you don't flip the normals of your object, right? Now you'd have to do that if I'm not wrong in edit mode. Let's go to edit mode, and yeah, you do. So make sure that everything's selected, right? Go to edit mode and go mesh normals, and then flip normals, right? So it's the normals are on the inside, not the outside, right? And now when we go back into object mode and go back in there, here I am, and then when I press play, I should be able to see my stuff, right? My mode. And if I go into my camera, which is 0, that's my camera view, right? And then press play, then now I should be able to see my skybox kind of moving left and right with my camera, and I can fall too, like that, because I went off the sky. So there's definitely ways, and by the way, I can make this so it's here like this. Let's take a look now. So I can move left and right along my skybox. It's quite quick, right? But you can see that the camera is following the player, right? Because I've got my camera parent, and if I go to the edge, I can fall off into oblivion.
How did you get to follow the player? I thought I pointed to this.
How I did it was my camera, right, is parented to my player. So if I physically move my player now, watch. So I'm not in play mode. I'm just moving around. Watch. If I move this up, well, actually, I got the wrong thing. Wait. Let's here. I select my box. Now watch. Hit my box.
Yeah, I have that working, but when I press play, it doesn't move with the player.
It could be the way you select your logic bricks. But more or less, if you notice, the camera is looking this way. This is the front of the top of the camera, and it's looking right at my player. Okay, one more thing I want to add before I stop this demo for this version of the Skybox. We're going to make one more version. We're going to make a sky dome, which is a different kind of thing altogether. Okay, so here's my sensor. I want to add a mouse sensor. And instead of a mouse click, left button, I want to go mouse movement. Right, there's mouse movement. There's different mouse sensors you can add in. You can make this is kind of cool. And on the right, I'm going to add an actuator. And my actuator is going to be a mouse actuator. And instead of visibility, see it says visibility mode, I'm going to do a look, mouse look, which is the ability to look up like almost like in 3D first-person shooter mode. I'm going to connect those two things together. So I did a mouse movement sensor and a mouse look actuator. I'm not changing any of the sensitivities or the thresholds or minimum maximums or anything like that. Now if I go down here and I press play, now first of all I go into camera mode. So here's what my camera would see. Let's make this so it takes up my screen. I'll toggle off my my screen, so this is it. So this is my game screen. Take a look. And I press play. And now when I look up, it does one of these because I've looked up in the wrong direction, but I can kind of scroll to left and right and have almost this view, whereas I look up and down. The reason why it's like that is because I've messed up remember my X and Y coordinates are flipped. But that's okay because mouse control allows me to do that as well. Under here, I say use the X-axis or the Y-axis, and the Z-axis is up and down. Well, this is the wrong axis. I want to go along the Y-axis instead for my Y. And if I press play to check that, now I have this up and down motion going on with left and right doing this. All I've done is I've changed my, I messed up because the way I've rotated, so I've got this Y-axis done. If I want to invert the look, because right now the look axis is when I kind of go up and down, right? Right now it's the Z-axis. I could change the order I do things. Like for example, my min maximum for this one is min is minus 90 and maximum is 90. I could also change these thresholds so I don't have complete, like I basically I can wrap myself around if I want to, right? That's not good. I can also create constraints like we did last time during our test. So it can stop me, I can keep track of what my angle is. So to stop me from looking further up than I want, like only maybe I only want to look up a certain angle, and it'll keep track of what my angle is. So that way I can't look up beyond how my neck would turn, right? Okay, so I can do these kind of constraints. But let's take a look and see what I got now. So I go press play, and now when I look up or pull back, I get kind of a mouse look, and I can do this. And I can also go left and right. I can't go front and back because, you know, as an example, but I got almost like this idea, this feeling that I'm in this like first person mode, right? To the left and right. You can't get it to go? To make it go forward and back, I'll finish off with those. Right, so I've got my left and right keyboards. By the way, it's all inverted because I messed up, but it's okay. It's the same idea. And to go left and back, right and forward and back. Again, I'll go kind of a W key for forward, and I'll add another one. I'll do a keyboard back, the S key for back, and on the right, I'll add in a couple of more motion actuators. 1, 2. So for forward, I'm going forward across the for my character. If you notice, I'm going across the pull it back here. Across the x-axis for forward. So it's going to go to the right, so positive x-axis, just the way it's aligned. So forward is going to be to the right, and back is going to be to the left, all across the x-axis. This again is inverted because of the way we've done things. Right, there's my stuff. go back into camera mode, hold this down, and press P. And now I should be able to move forward quite quickly, actually, and go back. It's almost got that mouse look. And if you notice, I can propel myself to look all the way up to up at 90 degrees. That's pretty high, right? No, it doesn't look really realistic because of the size of my box, my skybox. So let's pull out there and let's see if we can make it even more realistic. So how would I make this box bigger, right? Well, there's a couple things. I can make my character smaller, but my camera also is quite large, right? Because my camera takes up a long, big side and looks at the box as if it's it looks at the box as normal. So if you notice, my camera also has some abilities. If you go here to render, right? It tells you my resolution. My resolution is set right now at 1920 by 1080 for full resolution, right? That's for my embedded player mode, right? If I want a standalone player, because I can actually play this whole movie, I can make a movie and play it in a standalone player. Right now it's 640 by 480, right? That's one thing. The other thing is that from a stereo perspective, I can turn stereo on and off. I have some other options here for my object, right? So what is selected? What do I have selected right now? If I scroll this down, right? If you notice, I have my player, and inside my player, I have my camera selected. If you click, there's different options here for my camera, right? So if I click different things, like for example, I don't have a brush, I can't do certain things. I can add things like physics if I want to. So if I want my camera to fall and appear like it's my player, I could. So I have no physical form, just my camera is the one that's moving. I could do that. I could apply logic bricks to the camera just like I would to a player. So I can make it look like it's the player. So wherever I'm looking, it's just a trick. Again, it doesn't matter. You don't need a real body, right? So I could do that. And there's other things too. I'm on GLSL. I have ramps and modes and extra textures and blah, blah, blah. I can turn all those things on, right? On the bottom, right now my framing is letterbox. I could change that to extend or scale. I could also bake my view if I really wanted to go there, right? I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there at all. So that's really it in a nutshell for this. If I click world, here's my world. I can adjust my gravity and all that stuff like we did last time. You know, change the way I see things, right? If I look at the actual camera itself, there's an actual camera object right here. This is the third one from the right. Now I have other things. I have focal length. I could choose my camera to be only orthographic. So let's say I want to play a 2D game, which we're going to make in a bit. We're going to change our camera from perspective to orthographic only, which kind of changes our view, the way things work, the way things looks. And also we can change to panoramic. Let's change to panoramic for a second to see what that looks like. So I'm going to go back into camera view. And now I'm in panoramic mode. Let's take a look and see what that looks like. That's a kind of a weird mode. Look at this. So I've kind of got this weird thing going on with my camera. It looks different just because my camera's panoramic. If I go to orthographic, right, I'm on a 2D plane now, right, with my camera. I press play. Now you can see that no matter where I look at my camera, it's on the single plane. So you got to be careful where I look there. If I go back to perspective mode, it gives me my regular mode that I'm used to. Okay, so that's one. The other thing is, so focal length, it actually gives me, if I change this value for my camera, let's change it down. Take a look what happens if I go to like something like 20. Right, it actually pulls my camera back more. Because what's happening is, from a positioning perspective, look what it's doing. Look what my camera looks like right now. If I pull back my focal length, right, so I go back to like 10, watch what happens to my camera. So my camera comes back. So the origin of my camera, my eye is back here, but my focal length is way back here. So what's the effect of that? I see more. From the same position, I see more, almost like a wider view of what my view is. If I go back to camera now, I see that there's a wider view. If I press play and I go right and left, or front and back, or if I look up with my thing, I actually see my character more. And if you notice, I can even go into see the ground. Like, that's not good. You shouldn't be able to see the ground. Right? That's my focal length. That's what that does. Just to talk about camera a little bit. My standard camera focal length is 35. Like a 35 millimeter camera. Right? If I want to go into greater focal length, I can change my focal length to whatever I want. I can try and match my camera to actual cameras in real life, right? And this is great for image photography. If you want to do things like product photography or whatever you want to do, you can change your camera so it's very accurately close to, even as it can even have f-stop values. The whole thing, if you go into Blender cycles render as opposed to Blender game. Okay. The other thing that I want to start is I point out is one thing. See where it says clipping here on the camera? So I got my camera thing. Now take a look over here. There's a couple of other controls I want you to pay attention to. Here is where it's clipping. Start is 0.1 blender units. Here is 100 blender units. That's the end of my view. That means if I make this cube really big, and if it's greater than 100 blender units from where I see it, it will not show. My camera won't be able to see it until I get close enough. Let's see what I'm talking about here. So I kind of zoom out, and there's my cube, right? And my cube is about, my guess is about 20 blender units by 20 blender units, right? So if I want to increase this size, I'm going to say scale, oops, select my cube, scale, and I want to make it so that it's 5 times larger than it is, right? So let's go 5. So it's massive, right? And I also want to do the same thing for this, my ground. So it's scale 5 times longer than it is. So my ground is really big, and now my light source isn't correct anymore because my light source is too close, and it's not really near my sun. So I've made my cube really big, right? Now here in modeling mode, which is what we're in right now, this is okay because we're kind of in modeling mode, right? So I'm going to kind of select my object, go to the top so I can rearrange it, and go into ortho mode. Right at the top. And I'm going to kind of select it so that it moves as much as possible underneath my sun in ortho mode. And then from the top, from the front view, I'm going to move it so that it's higher up on the other thing. So I'm going to move this up way up here. Just move my sun around. That's all I'm doing. So it matches up with the sun that's inside my skybox. Okay, cool. It's even at 5 energy. Take a look. So now I'm going to go inside my cube. Right, so I'm not going to be in ortho mode anymore. I'm going to go back into perspective mode, and I'm going to kind of zoom out for a second. Okay, so here I am, and saying it's quite dark, right? Look, because my sun is so far away. My light source is way out there near the sun, right? So it's quite dark. So how do I fix that? Well, I have to increase the strength. I got to make this like 20. Now it's lit up again. Now the great thing is it really gives you a much better perspective on shadowing and everything else. My ground is pretty slick too. I mean, my ground, if I look at my material, I've got lots of specularity. I can turn that specularity way down, so it's only a little. And my object is right here, right? I can change different kinds of shading. I can do all kinds of stuff. Let's go back to my lamp for a second, my point lamp. So even at 20, it's still quite dark, right? Because it's so far away. If I go to like 30 or 50, I get a better view of what my sun. So it's brighter over here, and it's darker on the edges, right? And remember, my cube is way bigger than it was before. It's 5 times bigger than when I originally made it, right? Let's go back into camera mode, and let's zoom right in so I can see what my camera mode looks like. There's my camera mode. Kind of make this big. So this is what my view would look. I'm scrunching this up here. I'm gonna press play. Okay, cool. I can still see the edges of my world. So if I go there, it's going to take me longer to get there now, look, because it's 5 times longer. But it still comes to the point where I can fall off the world, right? I can still fall off the world. Fall off. Let's try this again. Right? So I can still look around, right? My cube. Now it looks a little better, but the clouds are still massive, right? Because even though my object is bigger, my clouds are also bigger, right? And they're way far away. Okay, let's try it again. It's going to zoom out of here again. Out, out, out. And there's my box. So I'm going to select a couple of things. One more thing for my example here. I'm going to select my plane, which is my ground. I'm going to rename this to ground just to be good. And my cube, which is my actual object. Right? I'm going to call this my sky. So my sky and my plane, and my ground. I'm going to make my sky 5 times larger again. So I'm going to go scale 5. It's really massive now. Okay, and do the same thing with my plane. So I'm going to keep scaling it up. So I'm going to scale my ground 5 times larger. Now look at my light source. It's way over here, right? Oh, I got to do the same trick and go to the top, front ortho mode, and scroll way up, right? So there's my my plane. I'm going to make this so that my light source is exactly where it is again. Reposition my light source from the front. Move this way up to the top. Our light source is way up here. Just make sure the right looks correct too. It is, right? And what I want to do is kind of zoom in here and go into perspective mode. And again, I get this dark kind of feeling, right? Man, it looks dark. How come it looks so dark? Well, because my light source is way over there now, far, far away. Here's my light source. So here's my point lamp. And let's rename this thing so it's like sun, just so it says sun, even though it's not a sun, it's a point lamp. And it's, remember, it provides ambient light. If I go to, from 30 energy, I gotta kind of go to 60 energy, right? And still, I'm quite dark all over the place. The world is a dark place to live. Let's go to 100 energy. Let's go to 500 energy. And why is this happening? Why am I getting this issue, right? Well, there's a couple of reasons. First, let's go into camera view mode, right? Here's my camera view. And there's my cube. And way up there is my light. Even if I made it 500, I'm still getting very bad view. Why? Because if I go back to my camera mode, and if I press play, by the way, this is what I'm going to see. I'm going to see this. The reason why is because my camera is so far away from my light that it doesn't work properly. So I see where I have my end, which is 100. I got to change my end for my clipping to like 500. That's one thing I need to do. Even then, right, it's still not going to provide a lot of light, radiant light. Okay, what if I change my light source? Here's my other option. Change my light source is crazy bright as a point light, right? I'm going to change this to a sun now, right? Now it's way too bright, right? Now I don't have to, I can tone this down, but then I get this other issue. How about an area lamp, right? Or a Hemi? Hemi's pretty good, but I can turn this way down to, you know, as an example, like maybe to 100. See what 100 looks like. Even that's too bright with a Hemi. Or 20. Even that's too bright. 10. Look at the energy I'm getting from my Hemi. How about 5? All right. How about 1? Right. Now with a Hemi, I'm not getting any kind of shadowing at all, right? I'm not getting any shadowing at all, right? I can add in, if I go to spot, it's way over there. The spotlight is pointing at the wrong place, way over there. It's way too narrow, right? It gives me some if I go to area, same thing, right? It's way over there. If I go to sun, I get really the top going on, and I got this stuff here, but nothing else. So I want to point these things out to you. So when you start using them, those light sources and all that kind of stuff, you understand that the limitations we have from a game perspective. Let's play this with my sun lamp. It's an actual sun now. All right, let's press play. Oops. Let's go to camera mode. Right, here's my camera mode. I want to zoom into my camera. Right, there it is. And press play. P for play. And now my ground is way over there. I'm going to try and move closer to my edges. So now look how far, look how close, look how long it takes for me to get there. I'm like running over there. I'm just doing like a 0.2 blender units per every time, right? But now you can see they're much farther away. And this is probably what you want to try and accomplish, something like that. That's far away, and add other lighting to give the effect, the sense that there's a sun, but really you can't put it where it's supposed to be. It's illusions. It's not true, right? And I can also increase the focal length. I can increase the length of my sun, because right now, this is another thing that's happening here. This is why, another reason why my lamp isn't working. Right? If I was to, let's go into, I'm going to go into wireframe mode for a second. Right? If I look at my lamp, my sun is a sun that points everywhere else. But look at the point of my sun. Right? Lamps in general have not just the point, but also have a length, right? And even though my energy is showing where it is, I can add shadow to my sun, right? That's one thing I want to kind of add in there. And I can add simple shadow. If I made it a spot lamp, here's my spot lamp, I also have a distance it covers. And my distance right now is 25. So if I want to go in there, as you can see, my distance kind of lands here, but it's not quite long enough, my distance. Look at my distance. It's like way up here. So to make that distance greater, I can kind of scale it. So I can scale it so it goes all the way down. So my distance is way big. When I scale this and I go back to sun, now my sun is way down here, right? This is good, right? And then when I go back into solid mode, right, or if I go back into, material mode, and I go in there, now I get a different kind of effect. Look where my guy is. Like he's I made my object way small. Zoom in here. All right, cool. So there's my sun. It's way back there. It's much brighter than before. It's a sun, and it's way up there, right? That's why with the object I've selected at 1 energy. If I go back to point, right, it's quite dark now, right? Now I've increased my point lamp, so it's if I increase my energy level, so it's much brighter. So if I go back to 200 or something like that, you still don't see anything because my focal length, my distance. Look, my distance is only 25. My distance has to be like 100, right? From my point lamp. My distance, otherwise, it's only 25. I don't get a lot of shadowing. If I say sphere, I can also do a sphere for my point lamp. This is one thing I could do. But I want to put my energy out. My fallout is an inverse square. I could change the way my light works. Let's go to 200. So really bright. So 200 distance. Now I get the same better effect with my point lamp. So it looks closer to what it would look like if I had a sun lamp. Because look, I'm only going to get lighting from the side that's showing. So I get sides, and see my object isn't even touching the ground. Let's take a look. My sides on the front where my lamp is, but the back is shadowing, but I don't get any shadowing here because my ground, although it's not shadeless, right, here's my ground, it's also the type of shadowing I'm using, right, and the kind of shading that I'm getting is it's, again, here's my shadow, so it says cast. And then if I want to put shadows only, I can turn that on. It also says my casting alpha is 1, and I can change some of these options as well for my shadowing, right? So it says receive shadows. I can receive shadows. I can receive transparencies. I can do shadows only. I can turn that on if I wanted to. Shadows and distance, right? And it changes the way my thing renders, my object. Cast only. I can cast shadows, but not. I don't receive a shadow. All that kind of stuff is something else I could add in for my ground. I could add more specularity. I can definitely add some kind of texture and all the stuff that we normally do. Okay, so again, a couple of items. You can see now that when I do now that I've changed the length of my light, it actually touches the ground. This is good. It's about 100 length, so it can reach. In these rays, it can cast rays that touches my object. If they're invisible to our eye, but it'll work. If I actually change this again back from a different kind of lamp, so if I go back to my lamp, my sun, and I change it to a spot, right, with a distance of 200, you see that there's a spot over here that's illuminated, but not me. Like to see that way over there in the distance, there's a spot that's illuminated. Well, I can look at it from the side. If I go from front orthographic mode and pull out now, right? And if I go, now it's really long. Look how big it is. Like my distance is like 200, right? Okay. If I go to wireframe mode for a second and look at my plane from the side. So this is from my right side. Okay, so there's my thing. If I want to make it so it shines on me, right? Because where it's positioned, I can rotate it so it's to the right. So my sun actually shines this way on me, right? And from my front, I can go to my front mode, which is correct, right? So my light from the side now shines this way. It's quite bright. But if you notice my distance, this is the distance. If I hover over, it says follow distance. The light is at half the original intensity at this point. So wherever the light is half the original intensity, it'll kind of fall out lower and lower, make it dimmer and dimmer. Right, so I'm going to go back to solid mode, actually into material mode, and I'm going to zoom back in there in, sorry, in orthographic, in perspective mode. Zoom in. Let's go into the my player for a second, zoom in. Okay, here I am. So now look at the horizon. There's a bit of glow because my sun, which is coming away from over there, is kind of pointing this direction. Now if I change my object, my light again, for a sun to a point, I get a lot more lighting than I did before. So if I press play, go back to camera mode and press play. Oops, got to zoom in there. I always change my camera view. Okay, press play. Now I can see that I'm getting some specularity on the ground, and I get some darkness on the edges, right? And I can see my light. It does look like it's bright. Like as I look up, look how my shadowing changes. So I'm actually getting some light coming from my sun. It's not so bad. Questions around this? So Skybox, right? Skybox. Okay, one more thing. So let's say, first of all, let me save this one and we'll start a new movie. And what I'll do, I'll change the Skybox into a sphere. We'll see how that works. Okay, so we'll save this one.